that goes back to that thing of like animals build the world that they live in. So, like the
sand dollar creates the currents, it builds its own little world.
And the whales bringing that iron up to the surface fuels a plankton bloom, and the phytoplankton is eaten by krill, and then the whales come and eat that krill. And so they're like, and we do that. We build our world. We farm. We change the currents of rivers. Every animal does this. We just don't really look at the way that other animals do it and recognize it in such a big way. Like we recognize that crows do it, and we look at beavers that they engineer their own spaces, and elephants do when they trample grasslands and then distribute seeds around. So all of us are doing that to build the world that we want to live in.
Come and take a nature walk with me. We're gonna check out some really cool trees. We're gonna hang around and talk about all those things in nature that we can't live without. Let's go get nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature. Nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature, baby. Nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature. Come on, let's get nerdy about nature.
What is up, my fellow nerds? Welcome to another long-awaited episode of the Nerd About Nature Podchat series. My name is Ross, I'm your host, and I would like to start off by just offering an apology for the long delay between these episodes. I've had dozens of people, both online and in real life, hounding me, asking when the next episode's gonna drop. And, I've had 3 or 4 of these episodes recorded for a while, but for the life of me, I just have not had the time, space, or capacity to sit down and edit them and mix them and do all the different things that it takes to get each one of these episodes out. This whole Nerd About Nature project, from these podcast episodes to the fun educational videos you see all over Instagram and YouTube, it's all part of an ongoing passion project that's supported by folks on Patreon. And, anybody that's alive in these crazy wild times that we're in today knows that there just never seems to be enough time to do all the things. So I'm slowly making my way to it, ticking those boxes. For repeat listeners here, you might notice that we have a new introduction and a cool new kind of hip-hoppy soundtrack, which is awesome. I'm really stoked about that. But anyway, let's get into today's episode, because I had the amazing opportunity to sit down with Laura from the Ucluelet Aquarium, which is in Ucluelet, BC, on the west coast of Vancouver Island, who is just an incredibly personable and amazing storyteller, great human, and the aquarium itself is a really awesome project that I wanted to highlight, because it's a catch and release aquarium project that takes samples from nearby waters, and it pumps water from the harbor through the whole system. So it's basically like you took a chunk of the kind of marine tidal ecosystems and brought it up onto land so people could look at all the things that are underneath the water. So it's a really awesome business model that I wanted to kind of promote. So Laura and I sat down to talk about all of the amazing, cool critters that they have in the aquarium itself, how it operates, how it began, the whole thing behind it, as well as her approach to education, which I find to be really refreshing these days, because it seems that everywhere in the world is obsessed with AI and digital and all sorts of different kind of interactive interfaces and things, and she takes a very hands-on approach, which I find to be just really awesome and still very applicable in learning these days. We also digressed a little bit and talked about some recent studies regarding marine life and fishing and tide pool ethics and etiquette, which I found to be a really awesome part of our conversation. So yeah, lots of great things coming up for you here. So without any more hustle and fussle and beating around the bush here, let's jump into the water and get into some deep conversation with Laura. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm really excited. I've never done it. Oh, yeah. This is fun.
This is going to be great. Would you like to start out by introducing yourself, where we are, and what it is you do?
All right. My name is Laura Griffith-Cochrane. We're in the intertidal zone on the west coast of Vancouver Island in Ucluelet, the traditional territory of Ucluelet, and I'm the executive director of the Ucluelet Aquarium.
Nice, which is a pretty rad little spot.
Yeah.
Pretty innovative, pretty unique, which we're going to talk all about. But before we do that, I'd like to just take a moment and look around because this is so, like, we timed this at low tide. So we're in the intertidal area. This is not, I mean, there are tide pools around, but it's maybe not your classic kind of tide pool areas that we have in kind of some of the bigger rocks.
Yeah.
Do you want to start off by just telling us why the intertidal area is so cool?
It's my favorite space in the world. It's full of life and nutrients. So we've got all of the violence of the ocean coming in and out and cycling nutrients, bringing fresh nitrogen and oxygen into this space. We have nutrients coming down from the forest, water filtering through all of the root systems of trees and other plants, and it's all meeting in this area. And so there's so many dynamic possibilities for life. If you look around, there's everything that's in here has to be able to be tolerant of fresh water, tolerant of salt water, tolerant of exposure to air, tolerant of sunshine. And so there's just all of these opportunities for biodiversity. And a lot of, when people go on vacation, they often go to these like nice, like calm, sandy beaches. But this is what I love. I love these rocky spaces where there's all kinds of little hidey holes. And there's just so much to look at.
Hidey holes, yeah.
Yeah.
I never really thought about it as like in terms of extremes because, I mean, you say the violence of the ocean, which is kind of hard to believe right now because it looks so relatively calm. But like in the wintertime, you have like 12-meter swells coming in, pummeling these areas, especially at a high tide. And so it's just grinding down all these big rocks into little rocks. And then everything here, like in the summertime, like the exposure for like these anemones, for example, that are just on this rock here, like the exposure to the sun, like it gets cranking like 25 degrees.
I love tide pool sculpins. So all of these little, if you look in any of these pools, there are these tiny little fish. A lot of people call them bullheads, and they look almost like a tadpole. They're like really top heavy, and then they've got these little tails, and they're unbelievably strong. So if you ever work with salmon, you'd know that you have to be so careful with water temperature. And then your work with redfish, re-engineering all of those river systems that have been damaged so that there's nice, I'm being visited by a bee. Hi, bumblebee.
No flowers for you here, buddy.
There's you need to have all of those refuge spaces for temperature control in streams, because if salmon experience temperature changes of more than 2 degrees in an hour, they'll die. And then you have tide pool sculpins that can be sitting in, let's say, like 12-degree seawater, and then the tide will go out and there's no renewing water coming in, so the temperature in those tide pools in the summertime can get up to 22 degrees, and then the ocean will come back, and that first wave is going to drastically change
Drop it
the
down
water
to like
temperature.
16.
Yeah, and they can tolerate that, and they can tolerate, we get 2 meters of rain a year, so the salinity within the tide pools will just fluctuate like crazy, and they thrive. I just think that there are these uncelebrated, wonderful little animals.
Yeah, I mean, and especially in my work with redfish, like you don't hate sculpins because they're part of it, but like especially when we do the juvenile swims, you'd see sculpins like feeding on baby coho salmon. You're like, no, like,
yeah.
So are those the same species of?
No.
Okay.
The ones that you're working with are probably the coast range sculpins.
That it'd be in freshwater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then these are tide pool sculpins.
Yeah, but you never really think of them, I don't know. In my experience, I haven't taken the time to appreciate their resilience, but it is a pretty wild little ecosystem we have here.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the Ucluelet Aquarium.
Yeah, so it's the first collect and release aquarium in Canada. So we're a not-for-profit, we're a charitable society, and we run a public aquarium from March 1st until November 30th every year. We bring in local species and then return them back to where we found them. I really believe in that release process. Do you mind if I dive into?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, give me the philosophy.
I love it. Okay, so I feel like in our day-to-day lives, because we don't feel as intricately part of ecosystems will kind of gravitate to one or two individuals, and we really fall in love with those individual animals. So if you have a pet,
charismatic megafauna,
or if there's a bird that visits you regularly in your backyard, or sometimes if people go to other aquariums, they'll really fall in love and be worried about the specific care of this one individual, and they can work and ensure that that gets the best care possible. But if you're releasing, you have to relinquish control, and you have to accept that the best care possible means you care for that whole ecosystem. And so my hope is that when people come out and they take part in the release, it's like they weave a thread back to that organism that they've put back that sticks with them. And so when they walk past the harbour, or they walk past this beautiful intertidal zone, they feel connected to it, and they will continue to care for it, or start to care for it.
Do you find that folks at the aquarium are able to kind of form those relationships with these undersea critters? Because like thinking of like the idea behind charismatic megafauna and how that has kind of guided a lot of conservation efforts, whether it's like talking about the polar bear regarding climate change or the panda regarding deforestation. They're these kind of like big-eyed, cute, mammalian, usually animals that people gravitate to because they feel some sort of like connection to them. But when you look at like a crab or a barnacle, it's much harder to feel that sort of like interspecies appreciation for the other. I mean, even me talking about sculpins, you know, like I've looked at them as a pest because I've only viewed them through this one lens, you know. Like, do you find that your work at the aquarium has allowed a lot of people to kind of form those relationships with fauna that might not necessarily be the big and charismatic ones?
Yeah. We like joke that the aquarium's kind of like a bait and switch thing.
Unintended there.
Yeah. So yeah, people come in because they want to see the octopus, and then when they leave, they're talking about jellyfish and barnacles, and it's so fun. One of my favorite things are sand dollars. Back in the days of the mini aquarium, so the aquarium used to be in this little, like, it was just almost like a sea can kind of space, and it was just plywood and 2x4s, and we had 30 tanks that we just had on cement blocks. Yeah. And people would come in and they would ask what lived in a sand dollar, and then people would put their hands in the tank, and you'd put a live sand dollar on their hands, and they'd feel all of the little spines moving, just like that super light tickling kind of feeling. And then I used to take them, put them underneath a microscope, and you could see the spines moving, and people would just have this like quiet moment where they'd be like, oh my God, it's alive.
This quiet, like, awakening.
Yeah, that's my favorite. It's not when people are like yelling or like, wow, or it's when that really like internal, like feeling connected to something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sand dollars are such interesting being. I mean, for people who aren't familiar with the sand dollar, it's in the same family as urchins. So you think of urchins as these round shelled things with hard spines, and they kind of move the spines to get around and crawl over things. Sand dollars are just that, but flattened with like really tiny spines. They almost kind of look like fur when you first pull them out of the water.
And they live in these colonies. They're really social. If you take time to look at sand dollars, and then you look at all of the hard surfaces around, like every surface around here has something living on it. There's like barnacles, there's mussels, there's sponges and bryozoans. And sand dollars, when you look at them, they move very slowly, and very rarely is there anything else living on them. They have these amazing antimicrobial and antifungal properties, really good at preventing against parasitism, and they work together. I think this is like to be really old, but there's like a Nature of Things with David Suzuki. I'm pretty sure it's a clip. We're watching like sand dollars react to the presence of a sunflower star and how they work as a community. Yeah.
Okay, not to get too distracted and far down the rabbit hole of sand dollars, but what do you mean they act as a community? Because they'll bury themselves in sand to hide from predators, right? How do they act as a community?
So they communicate by through chemical communication. So they release pheromones and chemical signals into the water. And if when you look at a sand dollar, it's got a thinner end and a thicker end. So the thinner end will bury down into the sand, and then the base, which has all of those lines that go down to the mouth, those are little mucus grooves. So all of the little spines on its downward side will trap plankton and pass it down to the mouth at the bottom. So sand dollars work together to pile up, and they create these little tiny spaces where the water will eddy, and then that allows the plankton to slow down and be captured by their spines.
Oh, no way.
And they'll all take turns in their places, moving around. So like one can be at the top for a while the other one is in the sand propping the other up, and then they'll move around. And then when they sense the presence of a predator, they will shift and pile up on one another and try to make it difficult for predators to get in there and grab one.
No way.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. So they like change the flow of water, like in the water column, to trap more plankton and feed themselves.
Yeah, it's like, if anyone gets nerdy about physics, it's the Venturi effect. So they're creating yeah.
Well, and for people who watch nature documentaries and charismatic megafauna, you probably see this a lot with the way that whales will do that. Will blow bubbles to kind of herd krill together and then like come through and just like gulp them. Like that's like a common thing, but
yeah,
you don't think of it with tiny little
echinoderms.
Echinoderms, that's right.
Echino
like
means
an echidna.
Or spiny skin. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Echino.
Yeah, durum, skin, echino. So you've got sand dollars, urchins, sea cucumbers, stars, all together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we just go down this rabbit hole, let's bring it back to the aquarium. What has the journey of the aquarium been? Because I only know it kind of as it is now, and like 9 years ago when I first kind of came out to the coast here on Vancouver Island. Like, how did it start?
It started by a man named Philip Brooker, and who's a really creative person. Phil also started the Aquavan with the Vancouver Aquarium, and Phil wanted to create a space that was more, I like to say, like less like an art gallery and more like an interactive artist studio. So where people are interacting directly with visitors, and where you could get hands-on and feel things and feel connected. And so Phil started it just on his own at the beginning, with other, like some volunteers and a staff member named Jim Shinkuski. And then there's so many, it's like hard with projects like this because there's so many wonderful people that help to get it off the ground. And then the public started, like at the beginning it's Ucluelet, so we're talking like 2005. Nobody's visiting Ucluelet. Everybody's going to Tofino. We're this weird town at the end of the road. Like nobody's going to visit. And then people started coming in and getting really excited about it. And so then in 2009, the society was formed in 2005. The society started really fundraising towards a permanent building. We were getting enough consistent visitation to say, okay, like if we meet this number of people in the summer, then I think this is going to be a consistent thing. Let's try and fundraise towards a permanent building. Because for anybody that didn't go into the mini aquarium, it was literally just like plywood and 2x4s. Like there are holes in the walls. We had to secure all of the tanks, not because we were worried about anything getting out, but we were worried about this mink that would come into the aquarium and try to eat the fish. And then it would get like super angry because it couldn't get anything and it would poop on the floor. It was awful. But so, and we didn't have any washrooms. There's no heat. And if you're working in October in an aquarium where you're cleaning tanks all day long and there's no heat, it was a pretty chilly adventure. So we started fundraising and we got so much community support. It's a pretty unreal project when you compare it to aquariums around the world. The community of Ucluelet really got behind it in such a big way. And then in 2012, the permanent building was built. There was so much volunteer work and so many donations that went into it. Almost all of the tanks came from other projects, like other aquariums, research projects from as far away as Nunavut. And all of them were refurbished by people in town and then put in the aquarium. The beams, like the trees in the aquarium, those were trees that were cut in order to make space for the community center. And Matt Harbage collected those and took care of them, and so that they could be installed in the facility. It was a huge labor of love.
Yeah, it's a beautiful building, and I think like that's kind of why I wanted to like bring you on and chat with you, because it is such a different model of an aquarium. You know, like I think about the aquariums that I visited when I was a kid in like Seattle, and like they're big and they're beautiful and they're well funded and they're bringing in exotic fish and things from all over the world, and it's very kind of like colonial and like displaying this like exotic animals and stuff from like all over the world, whereas this is like a community driven thing that uses catch and release models, so nothing is kept there for their lifetime, and it gives people a chance to see what's under the waves, under the surface of the water, in these kind of localized regions in a way that preserves these areas, because you can't obviously bring however many people are coming through there into these little tide pool things and maintain the habitat here. These places would be destroyed. So I feel like it's such a great and unique way to showcase the beauty we have around here in a way that protects these ecosystems and getting people involved. Like, it's just such a beautiful community thing.
I love it. I think it's going back to the bait and switch idea, but it's not really like, it's about the fish and it's about the animals, but it's about making connection. And I've talked to people where some people are like, well, there's so many like wonderful videos and there's so much information out there. Is this even needed anymore? But there's so much information out there, and yet we are still behaving in ways that are going to harm us. And so unless we feel connected, we feel, if you don't feel like something is going to affect you, it's really hard to motivate to make change. And connection is that factor that is going to like help everything that's out here, because they're valuable and worthy of respect too, but then also help us continue to exist as a species.
Right.
Yeah. That
resonates a lot. I feel like, because I spend so much time making videos online that people, it's like learning, but like there's so much crap on your phone and on the internet these days. It's like you could have the most detailed video about, like I'm sure that little rant about sand dollars like educated a lot of people who never, like, even though I'm sure that exists in a video somewhere on YouTube and stuff, you have to dig for it. Like there's so much out there that like getting there in person, like you have the touch tanks, you have like these ways where people can be involved in real life. I feel like that's such an underrated form of education these days, because everybody is just turning to like the remote digital stream it model.
And I think that it's educational and it's important, but you have to balance that with something that like weaves that thread of you being part of the world. Like you can learn a lot about something and know a lot of facts, but you still have to have that piece that makes you feel part of it.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of is like a funky one. Going back to what I was saying earlier, like it's easier for people to feel connected to land animals because we mostly live on the land, but these are, like we all share the same common ancestor at one point in time.
Yeah. I was reading this book called Eat, Poop, Die. Brilliant title.
Eat, Poop, Die.
Yeah, by Joe Roman. And he's talking about whales and like, how is it that we don't really see how much whales do for the world? And he was talking about how there used to be about 4 million whales, and then industrial whaling happened, and now there's about 1.5 million. So we're just not really seeing them as much.
Are these all like toothed and...
This is just like the whole whale population of the world. Yeah.
Only 1.5 million.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he was talking about how they engineer ecosystems. They move nutrients around the world, they dive deep for food, and then they come up to the surface and then they poop. So they're cycling iron and nitrogen and phosphorus around the planet. And
within layers,
sorry,
like
not phosphorus. Anyway,
the different layers of the ocean.
Yeah.
Because they're stratified. There's like the bottom layer, which doesn't mix much, and then the top layer, which gets all the solar radiation. So that's where like all the photosynthesizers live. So they're like kind of mixing those two zones.
Yeah. They're like from the deep sea.
The benthic zones.
Bringing it back up. And then they're also bringing it to other places. So, we come out to sometimes watch the whale migration here, humpback whales and gray whales that go down to Mexico and then come back up. And if you think about all of this life that they're consuming here, and then the females will go down there, down to Mexico and give birth. And so all that, like, it's not just about their urine and that they're taking around all that nitrogen and their poop, but also like the skin that they're sloughing off when they get down there, when they give birth. It's there's so much material that's moving around the world just because of them.
Yeah, that's an interesting one to look at it from like a biotic lens, because I know like when people talk about nutrient cycling in the ocean, and it's mostly attributed to currents and the way the waters flow, but like these are things that break those lines of current flows and stuff, moving nutrients both vertically within the water column, but then like horizontally, like across the world.
Yeah.
I love that idea of bringing, like, because the aquarium is beautiful, but there's not a lot of tech. There's not screens. There's not videos. There's nothing. There's no touch pads.
No. I went to this one aquarium and there was this like unreal, cool, massive coral ecosystem that this aquarium had made. And it was so awesome. And this tech company had partnered with them, and they were like, yeah, we can make these touch screens where you can flip through, and so then you can have more information available about the animals that are in this tank, because you've got limited space around an exhibit. But people, especially kids, would get stuck on these screens, and I watched so many kids just flipping through the screens instead of looking at the tank. And so all of that work to put together this massive thing, and nobody was really engaging with it. I wouldn't say nobody, but not in the way that if I had put all of that work together, that I would be hoping that people would be engaging with it. But I don't, there's so many other cool things that facilities can do that we can't do. But what I think our organization really can do is build connections. And I like not having any screens or technology. I think they've got their place, but in the aquarium, we just want people to connect, get off their phones, not be distracted by anything else, look at all the cool little things.
Funny, you're talking about building connections, and we're talking about social media, which is supposed to connect people, and my mics are not connecting, and we're having all these connection issues. Criminy. Yeah, I mean, it's again, like, I know this sounds ironic and hypocritical for me to say, because I operate in this like social media space, and this is a podcast that people are going to be listening on their devices, and it's not human to human in-person connection. But I feel like we're kind of shifting towards like a balance of that, or a better balance than we've had maybe in the past 5 or 10 years, especially with all the AI stuff coming out. We don't need to talk about that, but like it's getting to a point when like the things you see on the internet aren't necessarily even going to be real. So like, what's the point in engaging with that?
Yeah. I think that like I see a lot of things as different tools. So there's a lot of things that I really appreciate from social media. I live in a town, like we live in a town of 2,000 people. So there's limited experiences that we can have in our community, and social media has opened up my access to seeing different art, to learning about different cultures, to like hearing people's voices from themselves, which otherwise I would have to hear through other lenses or through other interpretations. And so I love that about social media, and I think it's one tool, and you just have to be really conscious of the fact that you're using that one tool, and you need to make sure that you're not just staying in that one sphere, but like branching out into others as well.
Totally. And it does have such great potential, especially from like an education perspective. Like you have the world at your fingertips. You can learn so much about so many things that you're interested in. I mean, like I see it with myself, my generation, with my parents who didn't grow up with this stuff. Like the way I love my dad to death, but he will sit there on the couch just sucked into his iPad looking at plants, and it's like he's doing constructive stuff with it. He's an avid gardener, but like there's no sense of like restraint. And I see like so many kids these days, and like while it does have so much potential to educate and for people to go down whatever rabbit holes they want and learn about things, it so often is co-opted to become a marketing tool to sell people things, to get you kind of feeling this like inadequacy, like you're too ugly, you're too fat, you're too thin, you don't have the coolest equipment, you're like always buying new things. It's just like it's become this force of capitalism that has just like sped things up so much. And the more and more time I spend on it personally, the more and more time I want to be off of it.
Yeah.
So like when you're dealing with like children and stuff who are like, because you have kids.
I do, yeah.
And so what's that balance like with technology, and then like seeing the way that kids interact in this aquarium space, and like being able to see these things in real life, and being like 6 inches from a rockfish and like between the glass, or going to the touch tanks and having an urchin kind of cling onto their finger. Like what's that experience like?
It's so cool.
Yeah.
That's been a real like joy of becoming a parent, is seeing them discover the world around them. I just want to like, so many local kids are so knowledgeable about this stuff. One of my favorite moments came from a few years back, where we had this 11-year-old volunteer, and she was fantastic. And she would come in and she would work really hard, and she got to know all of the specimens in there. And I think a lot of people don't expect kids to retain as much knowledge as they do. And so to have an 11-year-old that would be, working beside a tank, and then a visitor who's maybe in their 50s would walk by and go like, oh, those sunflower stars are so cool. And then the 11-year-old would be like, actually, those are bad stars. You can tell because of the webbing between their arms. And then this adult would be like, oh my God, there's this 11-year-old correcting me. But they know it. They grow up and they're part of the world. And I think that is such an important thing to celebrate. So with like looking at all of our North American cultures and how like colonialism and how much we move around as lots of cultures in the world, we don't have those long-term multi-generational connections to the space around us. And so we don't have that language and knowledge to interpret what change means. So if, for example, there's a year where like some years we have lots of aloe that wash up on the beaches. What does that say about the ocean? We don't really know. We're starting to learn that stuff right now. We're investing a lot more in research, but there's so many cultures that if they have that long connection to the space around them all over the world, they can interpret that stuff in real time. They know what that change means. And so for what I'm really excited about with my kids is that they're learning from people around them, and they're learning what these changes mean. Like if there's a poor salmon run, what does that mean? Does that mean we just pick up and move to a place where there's more salmon, or do we know that means something catastrophic for our community and we have to invest in it? And I really hope that my kids are going to be the kind of people that see the need to invest in it and like consider themselves part of the world and giving back to the world.
Yeah, I love the way that you said that, like growing up as a part of the world.
Mm.
And I feel like there is so much disconnection. It's almost like there's the idea of shifting baselines, when you're plugged into like baselines and watching them change over time. But in a sense, with how people and communities and cultures have moved across the world, specifically Western ones, to these parts of the world, there's almost like just like a break in the baseline where you don't even know what existed prior because you don't have that kind of long-standing cultural connection to it.
Daniel Pauly, the shifting baselines theory, favorite fisheries biologist, just the coolest man. I don't know if have you looked up his maps that he created?
No.
So Dr. Daniel Pauly, the Sea Around Us lab, created these maps, almost like topographical maps, with different colors, and comparing pre-industrial times in the Atlantic Ocean to post-industrial fishing times. And fisheries data is so incredibly well documented in a lot of places around the world, because a lot of fisheries data historically was intertwined with naval operations.
Right.
And so Dr. Pauly, if you just Google Dr. Daniel Pauly fisheries maps Atlantic Ocean, there's a map that compares the biomass in tonnage from the 1900s to the 2000s. And you can see this, especially around Newfoundland, this.
Okay. You were saying there's biomass around Newfoundland?
Yeah, because it's one of those super awesome upwelling zones, and there's so much life. And so comparing that area, you look at how much mass there was, how much life there was before industrial fishing happened, and then post-industrial fishing. It's just, it's insane.
And that specific map is just looking at biomass. It's not looking at like species diversity or anything like that?
Just biomass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible how much data is out there that is often just ignored blatantly.
Yeah. And then if you compare it to what our human experiences are, I think the important thing is to look at that data and then go, how does that affect us? So if my granddad went out fishing and wanted to fish for his family, he could go out in a non-motorized boat and get a few salmon, and that would be good for the family for a long time. And now, if I wanted to go out and get a few salmon, it's not likely that I'm going to be successful if I just row out and fish for a few hours, at the most of the harbor. It's more likely that I'm going to need to be in a motorized boat and move around, maybe even head a few hours offshore, have downriggers, have, like hundreds of dollars worth of fishing equipment. And so that data translates into our connection to the world and how we're experiencing it and the kind of effort that we have to do to be able to have the same experiences that previous generations have had.
Yeah, I mean, and then the experiences go from being like a sustenance, this is what you do to exist and survive, to suddenly a tourist attraction. It's like, it's a recreational thing. I mean, it's like you get your fishing license, you go out with your boys on the weekend, and it becomes this experience that you work to that is purely novel. Like you can get everything you need from the supermarket. So like, why do you need to fish? You do it because it's an experience, it's different. And like, that's the way at least it's pitched in a lot of these communities. And then that kind of ends up becoming the political swaying device. Is like, look at how many jobs there are in tourism because of the fishing industry versus how many fish are being produced. It's just like putting a different metric on the, dare I say, resource, quote unquote, as it shifts over that baseline.
I think like messaging is so important with those things, because I think you can have tourism that is like built on a stronger connection. So if you were to say market just going out on a boat, seeing the world from the water, maybe you're going to do some fishing and you're going to eat it and experience that from like, this is why we've been so connected to this part of the world, like it would sustain us. And if we don't catch anything, we don't catch anything. If we are going to catch something, we're going to behave in a way that respects the animal that we're catching. We're going to learn what bycatch we might have and how to handle that first. We're not going to damage ecosystems in the process. We're not going to throw anything that we accidentally catch to bait eagles for photographs. We're going to behave in a way that feels respectful and connected. Because I think a lot of visitors that come here, they look to us to tell them what they should expect to have a great time. And so if someone's like, we're going to go whale watching, we're going to pet a gray whale, then they're going to say, okay, well, I know that I've had a good time because they said that that's what I need to have a good time. And if you say, we're going to go out and we're going to be on the water and we're just going to see what we see because this is a beautiful space and you're excited about it, I think you can set the tone for tourism. And because if I were, to go to different places in the world, I don't know a lot about some of those places. So it's the people's reaction around me that's going to help me know, like, was this exciting? So we have these like very arbitrary definitions of what is the best animal to see. Yeah. Like for some people, they come out here and I have got to see a killer whale. And then I'll talk to some people. I remember these visitors that came into the aquarium and I was like, how's your visit going? And they're like, we went to Jasper National Park and we saw squirrels. And I was like, that's awesome. And you talk to birders and they're like, I saw a grosbeak. And that's what I'm excited about. So everybody has it within them to be super nerdy about something. And we just have to help people like find out what it is that they're nerdy about.
And connect to it.
Yeah.
And I think experience is a gateway drug, because if you are like have those experiences, get that hands-on connection, that in-person connection, that's going to, provide the groundwork to guide the rest of your life, doing things that like either work in that space or protect it. And without that, it's just out of sight, out of mind. And then you feel that disconnect from the world that we also intricately share.
Yeah. I really hope that when people come through the aquarium, they go back home and they think about a space that is meaningful for them in their life. Like whether it's a tree in a park that's close to their home or a forest ecosystem that they run through where that connection will go back with them. And then maybe when they're like, if they're out for a run, they're not just like, I'm getting my 45 minutes of exercise before work. They're going for a run and they're feeling like they're making time to be connected to the world. And then they carry that with them when they go into their work or they go into school or they go anywhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing that especially in like urban areas is like it's so easily just, forgotten that we are all a part of these ecosystems, however strange and rare and violent and all the different adjectives they may be. Like we are all part of them and we are all part of these nutrient cycles. Like you think about how much whales move nutrients around the oceans. Like think about how many nutrients and things are moved around because of people. Like we are part of it. Yeah,
totally. Oh God, there's so many studies we could talk about that are so interesting about humans moving nutrients around. There's oh my God. Yeah, there's one study that I read about caffeine, and in the North Pacific, caffeine culture, and it was talking
Starbucks.
and talking about how caffeine exits our metabolic system in the same form. And so like when we're, going
so it's still like a stimulant.
Yeah. And for a lot of towns like Victoria, when I was in university, was still releasing raw sewage into the ocean, and it affects the metabolisms and the reproductive systems of a lot of invertebrates, causing them to reproduce earlier.
Really?
Yeah. There's studies on the effects of antidepressants on salmon, and it makes them so bold. So they'll come out of these stream systems and then go into eelgrass beds and estuaries, and then when they're often, they'll spend some time fattening up, getting strong before they fully go out just into the ocean. But if they're subjected to a lot of antidepressants, they're just like, I'm ready to go. And then they just head out to the sea.
And then end up dying because they're malnourished. Yeah. Going back to the idea of like respect and honoring like our position in these, amongst these ecosystems, like I think from like an outdoor perspective, like there certainly is like a lot, like the hunting world has developed like a pretty strong ethos, I'd say, for like how you operate, how you work with different animals, and like the process behind like using every part of an animal, respecting it before you take the shot, like aiming for kill shots because you want to respect its life.
About this.
Yeah, but like I don't think that same respect is necessarily shown to ocean beings.
It's pretty wild when you start breaking it down. You think so if we wanted to go hunting, we'd have to we're in Canada, so you'd have to get your gun license,
Right.
unless you're bow hunting. And then
You can't just go into Walmart and leave
No.
with it.
oh my God. I have like such a hard time imagining
Yeah.
that. Like,
I know. What country in their right mind would make it so easy to do that?
it's so nuts. Anyway. So you get your gun license, and then you would get your core. So that's your conservation, outdoor, recreation, education. So it's a course you have to pass, this weekend-long course showing that you know how to identify what it is you have to shoot, or you're going to shoot, how to be safe in the outdoors, how to have minimal impact on ecosystems, and how to identify male from female, how to identify young from old, and
it's just like a 2-day intensive.
yeah. And so you pass that, and then you can apply for different licenses to go hunting. So like here on the island, there's a deer and elk. There's limited number of licenses for elk. So you'd go through this whole process and know where you're allowed to hunt things. Like you couldn't just rip around in the Wild Pacific Trail and be like, there's a deer, there's a grouse. You'd have to like go to a place where you're allowed to hunt. There's different rules if you are First Nations on your territory. There's different rules for people who are not First Nations going on to First Nations territory. And it's important that you know that. And if you want to go fishing, you pay your $25 and you go. And there's information on a website. Like DFO has information about what you're allowed to collect. But
cell service is spotty as ever, especially out here. Like,
and there's different catch allowances for different zones. So, there's like if you're on the West Coast, you're allowed to catch different amounts of animals versus on the east side of the island, which those are very different ecosystems. So that's important. But a lot of people don't really know that. And a lot of people learn the names of species from different cultural processes than like one education process. I'm not explaining this super well. So like if going back to like the grandfather experience, so if my mom learned from my grandfather how to fish, and my grandfather was like, yeah, these are rock cod, then my mom would know, okay, those are rock cod. And there are almost 12 species out here that are referred to as cod that are not cod. Like cod is a specific group of fish with 3 dorsal fins and a funny little barbel that comes off of its chin.
really?
But you can catch rockfish and sablefish and sell them as cod, and they are not cod. And I think about that comparison a lot, where if I went out hunting and I was like, yeah, I'm going deer hunting. And then I posted on Instagram later and I had a moose and a cow. And you were like, Laura, you did not shoot deer. And I'm like, they're both brown and they have 4 legs. I don't know what are you asking for here? Like, it's the same thing. And we don't demand that of fisheries. We don't say, okay, if you're going to go out, you have to know what it is that you're catching. And the reason that becomes important is because when we start to deal with conservation issues, we have to be able to speak a unifying language and understand why it's important. So for example, yellow eye rockfish can live about 200 years. They don't start reproducing until they're in their 20s. They're not really good at reproducing until they're in their 80s. And a lot of people refer to yellow eye rockfish as red snapper. And they do look like red snapper, which are on the East Coast in the Gulf of Mexico. But they're from a totally different family of fish. And so if DFO starts putting out notices saying these fish are a species at risk, we need to be really careful about ensuring we descend them, making sure they survive when they go back so that they can keep reproducing, and nobody refers to them as yellow eye rockfish. Then you have a disconnect between the conservation effort and the ability for it to be productive.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I can't help but think, and just because my world is more terrestrial based, but it's the same thing. You go to a lumber store and you buy fur. What species of fur? There's depending on where you are, there's so many different species of fur, and Doug fur isn't even a true fur, but it's still sold as fur. It's like, how did we mess this up? And then, you get into like the specifics of like species and populations. I chuckled when you had talked about someone walking down the trail here looking for grouse. And like that's laughable for someone to be like walking around town looking for deer. Like there's obviously areas where you can do that, but at the same time you can just come down to any of these tide pools and harvest whatever you want, no matter where you are. It's all like,
yeah, and
there's no regulations, there's no like safe places or like nurseries in a sense, like where you're just like harvesting is off limits. It's all just kind of open game.
there's rockfish protected areas. So our closest one here would be in the Broken Group, and but it was only a few years ago that Navionics, which is if you're out and about, the like where you can see, where you would actually see that on Navionics, where it would showcase, okay, you're coming up to a rockfish protected area. And because there isn't a mandated education program, the classic thing when I first moved out to Ucluelet in 2008 was there would be a group of people that would be really excited. They'd be out on a trip and they'd have beers the night before, and then the morning they'd wake up and go, oh my God, I have to print off my fishing license, because none of us had us on our phones then. And then they'd have to like find a place with a printer and print it off and go. And so they wouldn't have all that information of, by the way, there's a rockfish protected area out there. It's super important, make sure that you are not fishing in that area. There was a study that came out that was a really high percentage of protected areas. There's been no change in fishing practices. Excuse me.
Really?
Yeah. And a lot of them, Vancouver, there's a few rockfish protected areas close by, and there, we don't have a solid education system, and we also don't have a lot of fisheries officers that are out there and able to respond to these issues. So
I feel like that's just a lot of government agencies in general.
Yeah, I know.
Make
for
the regulations
this area,
tough, but then skimp on enforcement.
Yeah, I think there's 3 fisheries officers for the area that we're in, and they have to respond to marine mammal issues, tourism related issues. So if somebody, for example, is collecting mussels or scallops or oysters in the harbour, that's a health issue. You don't want people doing that. They're going to get really sick. So they would have to respond to that. They also respond to both commercial and recreational fishing issues. So anyone that's poaching, anyone that's doing big commercial operations where there's issues. And then some of them are also involved in like bigger, like other project training issues. Denise, who's an amazing person up in Tofino, is the firearms trainer for a huge part of Vancouver Island. And so she has responsibilities that take her away from this area. And so her ability to respond to local issues and then to be part of like just a big community-wide education program, like she's at her max. And yeah.
Well, and then there's also like the additional layer of like First Nations, and like in an era of UNDRIP when we should be honoring First Nations rights and title, which includes waters. I know there's like a lot of like rivers that people don't like, that the nations don't want fish, but they don't have jurisdiction, and DFO's like, oh, it's open, fair game. But it's like, and you put like one sign up on one of the how many trails that go to that specific stretch of river, it's like, how do you begin regulating that?
Yeah. And different nations have different priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love it if it was part of our harvesting culture to just check in and like look at that office, like the nation office's priorities, and go, okay, I'm in Ucluelet territory. These are culturally important species that I should be respectful of. What projects are of concern, what areas are trying to be rehabilitated. There are traditional clam gardens that are in the Ucluelet Harbour, and I know that that's a priority for those to be rehabilitated so they can be used. And for those of us that are recreating in an area, we're part of that story. We need to be aware of that and not be damaging things further.
Right. Yeah, I think that just goes back to recognizing that we're a part of this world, and that our world is bigger than just like us as the individual, which is like, North American culture is such an individualistic culture, like the way that we're all brought up. It's just like, I, me, what can I do? How do I do it? But like recognizing that we're a part of this, and that like when you're coming out for recreational fishing, or even if you are sustenance, like harvesting from, foraging, as like the foraging boom has driven me nuts lately, because so many people forage, but like, how does what you're taking from that land work within the indigenous like land stewardship goals of that nation? Like how can we be a part of this system together and like less focus on the individual, but as the community as a whole?
Yeah. And that, like, reaching out to learn from that community knowledge. If you're something that, going back to like hunting and fishing, that drives me nuts a little bit, because we don't know a lot about what we're fishing for, we can really quickly damage an area. And there's, if you reach out into your community and you're sharing data, then you can learn about what other people are noticing and then respond to that. So, for example, China rockfish have a territory of only 2 meters.
2 meters?
That's it. And they can live 80 years. So like 2 meters, 80 years.
Wait, like they don't venture out?
No.
They stay within...
As far as we know, that's it. They have their like 2 meter territories. And so...
How big are they?
They get to be about this big. And so ideally, there is an overlapping area where there's enough of a population that they can go and meet each other. And the analogy that I give,
where your territories overlap.
Yeah.
So it's like moving 6 times the length of your body in your lifetime and hoping that territory overlaps with a potential mate.
And so if, like, looking at this beautiful space that we're in, for there to be effective reproduction within that rockfish population, there needs to be at least a few individuals where they can see each other and then interact and mate. And so if I follow the legal regulations of the province, and I have my spot and I go back to, and you go to the same spot, and, you know, we don't really see each other that often and we don't communicate. We give each other the stink eye because we're fishermen. We don't like each other. And then we fish out a whole area of China rockfish. Then we are going to depend on there being another area close by that we haven't fished out, where their larval young is going to come through ocean currents and come back and settle in. But if we're not keeping track of what's out there, and we're not talking to anyone else, like, we might not realize that we are completely depleting an area of a species. And there's, you know, a lot of people don't really love rockfish. You know, they think of them as easy to catch. They're not really big. Some people just love the way salmon look. They're so beautiful.
Right. Culturally, that's kind of how we've been brought up too. Like, we praise the salmon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a salmon stomach content study out of the University of Victoria, and then if, you know, sometimes just talking to other people on the dock, if they have a salmon, we've looked at what's in their stomachs, and a lot of them eat young rockfish. So it's part of the whole story. So we might not praise the rockfish as much for our dinner table, but the things that we want to eat need them. So having that complex ecosystem is super important. And some rockfish only reproduce once every 10 years. And so you need to have that diversity to have lots of food options. So if a boccaccio is reproducing 1 year, and that's what a lot of salmon are eating, and then the herring have a good year the next year, and that's what a lot of salmon are eating, there's enough so that when one food species is not doing well, let's say there's a bad herring year, there's other things for those things that we love to eat.
Yeah, it's about maintaining ecological complexity and diversity.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at like the cod stocks on the East Coast and the Atlantic cod, and how those were impacted by overfishing. And like to a point when now, how many years has it been? Has the fishery been closed? It
was
like
in
decades.
The 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's still not rebounding. Like, very barely. Like, it's hanging on. Like,
that goes back to that thing of, like, animals build the world that they live in. So, you know, like the
sand dollar creates the currents. It builds its own little world.
And the whales bringing that iron up to the surface fuels a plankton bloom, and the phytoplankton is eaten by krill, and then the whales come and eat that krill. And so they're like, and we do that. We build our world. We farm. We change the currents of rivers. Every animal does this. We just don't really look at the way that other animals do it and recognize it in such a big way. Like we recognize that crows do it, and we look at beavers that they engineer their own spaces, and elephants do when they trample grasslands and then distribute seeds around. So all of us are doing that to build the world that we want to live in. And
but there's like unintended consequences as well.
Yeah.
And like, especially I would wager to say that in the last like 150 years, we focused so much on building that we haven't stopped and recognized what we've destroyed through the process of building. Partly because we were totally unaware of it. But even now that we are aware, there's still forces like these established industries that are still trying to do the same thing they've always been doing, even though they're fully well aware of everything that is destroyed in the process of them operating that way. So how do we change that culture? Like how do we get those fishermen, instead of stink-eyeing each other in that little pocket, like how do we get them talking about it?
yeah. Well, I'm super biased. I think it's connection.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Connecting in the aquarium.
So free passes for anybody who fishes to come to the aquarium. Check it out. Learn a thing or two.
This awesome group of people that came in last fall, and we were talking to them about like how to hold fish properly so that when you release them, if it's something that you don't want to eat, how to care for that animal and put it back in a way where it's likely to survive.
Yeah, like a safe release.
Yeah. And so, if you're not going to eat it, just put it back. Don't take a picture with it. Just immediately put it back. It's so stressed out. And I was talking about like our rib cages. I'm doing this thing that I do with kids, like feel your rib cage. And when you're, that classic photo where someone's holding the fish by the tail and then squeezing it underneath the fins, it's where its heart is, and it doesn't have this protective hard-boned rib cage to protect its heart. And so if you're creating this trauma in its internal organs, it's not going to survive super well. So we were just talking about that. And then they came back and they're like, we went fishing, and they were so excited to share their story about how they were, they were like really proud of what they were doing. And that was really cool. It like fueled
totally
my excitement too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's an easy thing as humans get older to just kind of become more rigid and stuck in our ways. But like that idea of like being a lifelong learner, and there's been studies on like the fish release in salmon, like catch and release fishing. People are like, oh, it's fine, I'm just catching and releasing, I'm not taking it home, not eating it. But like the way you handle that fish can have big impacts on the way that it goes back and is able to survive. And it's been a while since I read the study. I think it was 2 years ago it came out, so my numbers might be a bit off, but it was something like 70% of all the salmon that are returned back, once you've met your quota, you're not allowed to keep any more of the different species. And then so if you catch like an extra coho that's above your limit, you like put it back in the ocean. But because of the way those fish are handled and because of the trauma they experience, it's like 70% of the fish released end up dying anyway, which is like, that's no better. Like, how do we fix this? It's through education and teaching people different ways of doing things, but they also have to be receptive to learning.
Yeah. I spoke at a couple of spearfishing conferences and spearfishing gatherings, and there's some people in that community that are so excited to be conservation minded, and like seeing themselves as a long time, like they want their kids to do it and they want to be part of it, and that is so cool. And then there's some people that just, they just want a picture of themselves with a Puget Sound king crab above the water. It's like, oh, yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Oh,
Puget Sound king crab above the water.
Yeah, we don't really know anything about Puget Sound king crabs. So Washington State actually made it illegal to harvest them. Their closest relative, the brown box crab, lives more than 40 years. They brood their eggs for 18 months. It's so cool. They're obligate molters. So the female and male have to shed their outer skin to be able to mate. I like to joke that they're like throwing their clothes around and having little nudist parties. Like, you see all the crab shells washing up. And so they have to shed their shells to be able to mate. And then the female will keep her eggs in her carapace. That's the shell. And there's this sort of rounded piece on the stomach that will be able to open and close so that she can let water flow through. And there's very little change in the eggs for the first year, and then rapid differentiation in the last 6 months. So if you, let's, like, for example, look at the Dungeness crab fishery, you're not allowed to harvest soft-shelled crabs, and those are the ones that are active in developing and mating. And you're not allowed to collect females that are brooding eggs. And so there's an element of conservation in those regulations. With brown box crabs and Puget Sound king crabs, you can't really see unless you were to open the stomach, which can be very dangerous for, whether they're brooding eggs. And because they're like those crabs, their heritage is in the hermit crabs. So they have 3 pairs of legs instead of 4. And if you look at the belly, they have those sections where it almost looks like they're male. And so to be able to tell female from male, you would look at asymmetry on the stomach instead of looking for, we say, like the beehive or the lighthouse. Yeah. And so it's a lot easier for people to mistakenly harvest females. And because they live so long, it's likely, just like a lot of other organisms in the ocean, that the largest ones are the ones that are the biggest contributors to the next generation. And because we don't have a solid education program up here to ensure that people know what it is that they're harvesting and male from female and all that kind of stuff, we really recommend that people just don't harvest them. And anecdotally, from a lot of divers that have been diving for a long time, their populations are decreasing. But because we never have done baseline studies, we can't go out there and prove that they're going down in number. So that's part of just being conservation minded and using that community data to work together to protect something.
Having that severed baseline. And it's kind of like, I mean, as much as we learn, it almost feels like every time, by the time DFO gets around to setting limits on things, it's kind of like too late.
Yeah. The other issue, I mean, I could go off on a tangent. What else do you want to ask before I go off on a weird rant?
I mean, I'm happy to hear your tangent. I have a couple tide pool questions.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because one of the things that I think about, too, as just like a person walking around in these tidal areas at low tides, I try to stay on the high points, the rocks that don't have barnacles, that don't have soft things. I see people all the time walking over anemones when they're, I could take a picture and show this for people on the podcast, but like, do you have any tips? Because I mean, like, a lot of the damage that's created isn't intentional. You know, I don't mean to like villainize people. It's just the fact that we don't know. So like, if people are walking around these tide pool areas, what can they avoid? How are they
like
damaged?
You said. Yeah. Look where you walk, take your time, go slowly. And I like to, it's where I try to slow down. So I work for a not-for-profit. So the classic thing is like, you know, we're always rushing. There's always so much we need to do. And then wanting to have those really important personal connections with people. Like, I often feel like we're really, we are really busy, but in the intertidal zone, I try to really slow down and just really look at what's going on in a small space, because I'm just staring at there's this cluster of black turban snails. They can live over 100 years, by the way. They're so cool.
Black turban snails can.
Yeah. And then there's these little aggregating anemones and barnacles and chitons. And there's so much to see in one space. And so I like to encourage people to find a good spot and take at least 5 minutes to just look at it and see what's going on. Get some, if you're still, the sculpins will start coming out from underneath the rocks.
Right.
You'll see little shrimp.
Little hermit crabs will move about.
I love it when you see lots of hermit crabs. They're like these little parachuters. They, tuck and roll. They'll see you coming and they just like let go of the rock and tumble down. Yeah.
What is your favorite tide pool critter?
Oh my gosh, that's such a horrible question to
ask.
I
I take that back, because I hate when people ask what my favorite tree is too.
Yeah.
You're like, oh dude, they're all so different.
Yeah.
What's one of the most fascinating or cool things you've seen in a tide pool recently?
Okay. just before we started, I went around the corner to get some sponge for
You
the
did. You were
nudibranchs,
collecting. I got a video of you.
And I found some orange sponge, and it is vibrantly orange. And there are these tiny little orange nudibranchs that live just on those little clusters of orange sponge. And I think it's incredible that they find each other. You know, when they're in their planktonic stage, both of them have planktonic stages. By the way, I'm just going to get nerdy about plankton for a minute. Plankton is not specific to an organism.
Like plankton is not a species.
Exactly. Plankton is a measurement of mobility. And so if you can fight a 1-knot current and swim away, you're nekton. If you are carried by any currents, you're plankton. If you're blown around the ocean, you're pleuston. So when I talk about plankton, it means, in this case, they're microscopic, and we often talk about small things with plankton, but what I'm talking about is just that they're organisms that are carried around the world by the ocean. So, and
this is like a lot of organisms in their like planktonic state where they're like, you know, the spores of, I don't know, like everything, like from clams, like filter feeders to starfish, like everything kind of starts as these tiny little bits of plankton. Yeah, I think a lot of like caterpillars and butterflies, or like dandelions, where they have this, you know, like their seeds are carried by the wind and then find new spots. And so in here, so much of this life it's not walking from one place to another like we would and finding a new home. It's just carried around by the ocean. And so there's this cool relationship where these sponges have to find this ideal spot, and then these nudibranchs have to be able to pick up on those cues, and there has to be enough of them just floating around in the ocean that at least one can find this tiny little sponge cluster that's like the size of a quarter, and then settle on it and grow, and have another one settle on it and grow, and then they reproduce and then send their millions of young out to the ocean. It's just such a, like the like chances of that happening are so small. It's so cool. That concept brings me to one of my maybe last questions, going back to the aquarium, because we've diverted from the aquarium quite a bit. There's one pool one tank in the aquarium that is probably the coolest one.
It's so cool. I know,
you know exactly what I'm talking about.
It's so cool.
What's so cool about it?
So in 2012, when we built the aquarium, we put this rock in there.
So before you begin, I think this is probably an important thing for people who are listening who don't know about this, but like the aquarium, not only is it catch and release, but like you're using water from the harbor, cycling it through, so they're constantly getting fresh water from the environment they're in. They're not like in like an isolated tank. They're all still part of the ecosystem.
I would love to talk about that after too, because we're so lucky with being able to just pump raw water through. So there's this rock in the middle of this tank. We put it in there in 2012, back in the mini aquarium. A man that used to work at the aquarium named Spencer Wilson, and I built this like trial version of this exhibit, and then in this aquarium, we set it up, and we've never turned it off, and we didn't put anything in there, and we don't take anything out, and so now we have this rock that is covered with life, and that little ecosystem is entirely fueled by the water coming through. So in the aquarium, we do 250 gallons per minute. And so there's constant refreshing going on in that tank, and everything that's in there is fed by plankton or is eating the other things that are fed by plankton, and arrived by plankton. So it's constantly changing.
So what kind of things do you have in there? I know there's brittle stars.
Yeah, the brittle stars are so cool. Yeah, giant rock scallops, swimming scallops. There's some really beautiful colonies of sponges that are in there. We've got some mussels, some barnacles, a really fantastic slime worm colony that's like this big, and every time the garbage truck comes down the road, it's like and then there's a couple of little crabs that live underneath the rock. They've tunneled underneath there and made their homes. There's some urchins, some bat stars, some leather stars.
Leather stars too.
Yeah.
And everything in there started as a microscopic blip floating around in ocean water that was just siphoned through and then found a place to land on this rock or on the substrate created by the environment in that little thing.
We really wanted to talk about how great the water is up here. So because we live in Canada and the water's cold, a lot of people have gone to warm places to go and explore. So I'll talk to a lot of visitors who have gone snorkeling when they've gone on vacation. And they don't realize how full of life and how beautiful and how colorful our ecosystems are up here.
Truly colorful.
Yeah. And people are sometimes really disappointed by the clarity of the water. So say, I was in like Roatan in Honduras and I went diving and the water's so clear you can see it 80 feet. And I'm getting a little snarky because that's really cool that you can do it there. But the reason why our ecosystems look like this and are so biodiverse is because their water's full of life. And I like to compare our ocean ecosystem here like a rainforest, whereas when you're on reef systems, it's kind of like you're going to different oases in a desert system. Like life is very specifically concentrated, whereas up here it's like spilling out. It's just on everything and amongst everything.
So the murky water is
from life,
nutrients and life, like in the water. As annoying as it is that you can't see. So I mean, those other ecosystems are, I don't want to say they're dead, but like they're more lifeless.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things with climate change and ocean acidification is it makes it more difficult for especially those smaller and like soft-shelled things to be existing in the water column.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just like when we were talking about, having different food sources, the more that we lose those things, the more that we lose the resiliency of the ecosystem to continue to exist. I want to chat about the aquarium's water system for a second because it's so cool. So something that I get asked a lot in the aquarium is, well, how do those animals do when they go back to the wild? And because we're a new system, we don't have a lot of data on that, but we can take steps to ensure that they're going to do well. And something that I love about our water system is that everything that's in the aquarium is experiencing the seasons and the daily chemical temperature and salinity changes that are going on while they're in the aquarium. So in the mini aquarium, something that was really cool is we would watch crab behaviors change based on the tides. So even though the Dungeness crabs were in this exhibit and they couldn't see outside of the aquarium, they could smell the chemical changes of the tide going in and out, and they would bury or they would come out. And which was super cool. Yeah. So if we go to release something, it can sense the season that it's in. It's responding to chemical cues that are in the ocean. It's responding to the blooms of life that are going on in the ocean around it. And so when we put it back, it is attuned to what's going on in the ecosystem.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so like the plumose anemones, the scallops, the barnacles, they're eating the same food that they would be eating in the wild. They're getting the same nutrient cycles that they would be getting in the wild. And I think a lot about what is that sensory experience like for something that's in the aquarium. And so we're a very visual species. And so when I look around, I've got chemical cues and sensory cues going on around my body where I can sense that it's the late spring. Like, you're breathing through your nose and you can smell
the air temp, the wind.
Yeah. Like I can see some of the little dandelions that are blooming up there. Or, and when you walk out the door in the morning, you can smell them. You can smell some of the flowers blooming. I can hear bird song in the morning. That's a really great cue for me to know that it's late spring. And temperature. And so if, so much of my experience is visual, but if I wasn't experiencing anything visually, I could still tell that it's late spring from all these cues around me. And so if I were this little nudibranch in the aquarium and I have no visual cues, I could still cruise around in the aquarium and I could pick up on this information that's telling me
That is
it's
blowing my mind right now.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about like the change of tide having a smell.
Yeah, it's,
You know?
well, especially
Like
in
if
the
you're
harbor.
in water, yeah.
Yeah, because every time the water comes up, you've had all of this algae and the rocks that have been heated by the sun or have been washed by rain, and then all of that changes its chemical
Composure, and then you're picking up on that.
Yeah, and then the tide will rise, and that will be flushed throughout the ecosystem. Some things will die when they're exposed to air, and so there will be that smell of
Death.
yeah.
Well, or food, scavenging food.
Yeah, exactly.
Things
For
you can...
shrimp and crabs, and like that's the best.
Okay. That's just changing my mind about everything, especially as the tide comes up. We don't have too much longer here before our feet are wet.
Yeah, it's getting pretty close.
But this was like the first aquarium of this kind, right? Where you're bringing in ocean water and it's part of the system.
Where this is like our... there's some aquariums that do continuous circulation around the world.
Okay.
Yeah, there's other ones that do that as well.
But you guys were the first in the area.
We're the first where, like, this is putting it all together. We're collect and release. We circulate water through the aquarium, local species only. Our main focus is education and connection building. And, yeah.
And how have things been going? I mean,
just amazing.
Things have been booming lately.
Really, really wonderful. We've got like such a good team. We've got a wonderful board. We've got a supportive community. I need to like knock on wood. Like it's
and
it's fantastic.
How many people do you? Oh God!
You're about to ask how many people do we see a year? So we see 50,000 visitors a year, which is huge. A lot.
50,000 a year.
And that's
and how many people do you employ? Like 16?
We have 10 full-time year-round staff, and then 6 summer staff.
Uh-huh.
So one of the challenges that we have living in a remote area is that we don't get a lot of consistent volunteers. So somewhere like the Vancouver Aquarium has 1,000 volunteers.
Wow.
Yeah. And, there's excited university students, there's individuals who've retired, there are people that are just really passionate about marine education, and they'll volunteer. And we live in a really expensive area, so a lot of people that are out here working sometimes are working 2 jobs. They don't have a lot of free time to come in and just help us clean tanks and do interpretation. And so our costs are quite high for labor, and but we have 10 full-time year-round staff for everything that we want to do. I think we could double that, but we can't do that.
It's so impressive though. I mean, like, for how productive it is, how amazing of an experience it is. Like, to anybody listening, come out to Yuki and check it out. It's definitely worth the trip as it is.
Yeah, and we really try to do like non-scripted, just like personal connection. So sometimes people come in and they're like, okay, does a tour start? And we're like, nope, you just come in and cruise around and ask us questions and go around at least twice.
Yeah. For repeat stuff too, because every year I'm assuming it's different with like what you're able to find.
Yeah.
And it's like this year you like try to get a great giant
I'm so excited.
a Pacific octopus every year.
Yeah.
What's some of like the coolest things that you've been able to find and have featured?
Oh man, yeah, but I'm a nerd. So like everybody wants to talk about the octopus, and we have this crab, this little hermit crab that's in the aquarium right now that lives just in tube worm casings. So you think about how mobile hermit crabs are, and this crab lives just in a calcareous tube worm casing. And so she's just in there in this rock that we collected, and that's where she's going to be her whole life. So we very rarely collect them. We have a slime star right now, and they're super cool. They can produce this massive amount of thick mucus to protect themselves if they...
a slime star.
Yeah.
Kind of like a slug would, just protected by the mucus.
Yeah. We have a black eye hermit crab. We haven't had one in about 4 years. And they're maybe the most charismatic of the hermit crabs. They live in moon snail shells. They're really, really big.
Oh, so they get big.
Yeah. And then I've talked about Puget Sound king crabs. Those are some of the animals that I love. We've got this little one that's just this big, and then we have this large one. Some of our team came in at night a few nights ago, they were coming in on purpose to check and see if there were any shaggy mouse nudibranchs that were shaggy mouse nudibranchs are kind of an issue because we pump in raw seawater. They arrive in their planktonic stage and they eat anemones. And that's not in the grand scheme of things, it isn't an issue. Like in the wild, that's what they do and that's fine. But in an aquarium where we have concentrated a number of animals, if we get a shaggy mouse nudibranch in there, they just kind of munch on things. They don't eat the whole animal, and so it can open it up for disease outbreaks. So we just have to manage those.
And where do you go when you're looking for these species? Do you just get on a boat in the spring
right
and just
Yeah, we're so lucky. There's a couple of dive sites at the mouth of the Ucluelet Harbour. I love coming out to the Wild Pacific Trail for all of the green surf anemones, the aggregating anemones, purple urchins, all of these seaweeds, so many different kinds of turban snails and channel top snails. And then we also go to Terrace Beach and Little Beach. And then we do go up to Tofino for a couple of things. We can find strawberry anemones in Ucluelet, but it's on this really exposed wall. And there's this site up in Tofino where we can get strawberry anemones and get the whole rock. And so that way we're reducing
you're not
the risk of damage.
You're not prying off their hold fast.
So we can take the whole thing and then we dive the whole thing back.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And what's the release like? Because you do the release every year in the fall.
Mm-hmm. It's actually quite a
big
process.
Party.
So yeah, it is. It's really exciting. So we have a veterinarian that we work with, and we do inspections throughout the season to make sure that what we have is being well cared for, and that also we are not accidentally breeding any kind of harmful parasite or bacteria. Because what we have to be, it's not just about caring for the individuals that we have, it's also about caring for the whole ecosystem. So we have to make sure that when we put something back, we're not putting the ecosystem out there at risk. So our veterinarian comes out, we have a big inspection for everything in the aquarium. Even if we're inspecting just one individual to put back, we go through our whole practices. And then we apply for introduction and transfer permits through the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And once that has been reviewed and we receive our permits, then we coordinate with weather. The tourism season and the ideal collection season do not line up. So we cancel 50% of any plans that we have, because we'll plan to go out and collect in the intertidal zone, and it's beautiful and calm right now. But in December or February, there's waves the size of a house that are smashing, and so we cannot go out and safely release for either humans or the organisms we care for. So, so we have to find a time where we can safely go back, and then we plan that, and then we return them, and then we have to fill out all of our paperwork and confirm that we've released everything.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's such a cool model. I love it. Has it inspired quite a few other similar ones?
Yeah. There's one in Campbell River. They have our old building. That's the Discovery Passage Aquarium. And Ricky, who is their curator, is fantastic. A really innovative, creative human. There's one in Gibson's. The Tide Pools Aquarium. There's one that just started. I want to stay here until we're half underwater.
Just gonna lift the cord up.
Yeah.
The tide is literally kissing our feet right now.
Yeah. There's one that just started called the North Coast Aquarium. The North Coast education site up in Prince Rupert. There's a woman who came through and loved the model and started one in Scotland.
Oh, so it's gone international.
Yeah. One of our previous directors, Melanie Knight, who's a wonderful marine educator too, started one in Petty Harbour. And then one of their first employees moved to back to their home in Halifax and started the Back to the Sea Society. And so there's a little aquarium in Dartmouth.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And how come it's not in the States? I guess we kind of talked about that, but
as from my understanding, there's some water restrictions that would prevent some of this going on in
from like
in different
going
states.
up from the harbor into an establishment and then back out of the harbor.
There's a fantastic aquarium though in Port Townsend that's out on the dock, and they do. I've met some of their personnel, and they're wonderful. Yeah. I haven't been yet, though. I got to go down there.
Yeah, Port Townsend's a great little town.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to talk about regarding the aquarium?
Oh, just come in and say hi. Come in and nerd out.
Yeah. I think we're reaching our limit here. Before we go, though, this project is supported by folks on Patreon. And for every episode that we do, even when the tide comes up to our feet here, I make a donation to a nonprofit of my guest's choice.
It's the aquarium.
Well, I don't think it can be the aquarium, though. So if you have anybody else you'd like to shout out, talk about why you would like to support them and how, like where would you like this week's donation to go?
Surfrider Pacific Rim.
Surfrider?
Yeah, I also used to volunteer with Surfrider, and they're just a fantastic organization. We're also neighbors now. They have their
the Resurf.
Yeah, the Resurf building. And they've done so much work on legislation around plastic pollution. And the other thing that I really love about Surfrider, which is more of an international thing, but about ensuring that there's access to the ocean for everybody. That's something that they've been so cool about. And, not all of us, there's a few very large homes near us, and not all of us can afford to live on those spaces. So making sure that we all have access to come in and connect with these spaces, I think is so important. So Surfrider is another organization that I really love.
Yeah. I love that. Totally agree with everything you said. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. You wore rubber boots, which was a wise call.
Yeah.
Good footwear decision. Thanks so much, Laura. It's been great.
Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.
Well, wrapping up a good long convo at the beach with wet feet is never a bad thing. So thanks to Laura for sticking with me through it and sharing all that amazing information. If you would like to learn more about the Ucluelet Aquarium, you can do so at uclueletaquarium.org. That's Ucluelet, UCLUELET Aquarium, AQUARIUM.org. Or better yet, if you're in Ucluelet, on vacation or something, feel free to swing by, because it is truly an amazing experience for both young and old and everyone in between. It is an awesome, awesome place. For every Podchat episode, I make a donation to the nonprofit of my guest's choice, and this week Laura has selected the Surfrider Pacific Rim chapter. You can learn more about them at surfrider.org. And this whole Nerdy About Nature project, everything from these podcast episodes to the videos you see online, it's all a passion project, and it's all supported thanks to the people on Patreon who enjoy what they're watching and listening to and want to help support it. So if that includes you, awesome. If you would like to be a part of it, you can check out patreon.com/nerdaboutnature for awesome perks and merch and all sorts of fun stuff, and ways to support this project further. So thanks to everybody for tuning into this episode today, whether you're on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you are, however you got here. Thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to catch you all next time. This episode of the Nerdy About Nature Podchat series was produced by me, Ross Reed, and made possible with support from individuals like yourself. For ways to support this project and to learn more, check out nerdaboutnature.com or @nerdaboutnature on your favorite social platform.